Thanks again for showing us the new Xbox.
Absolutely.
There was a lot of content shown yesterday. A lot of it dealt with sort of the fact that the next Xbox has a lot of interactions with different types of media, Skype, cable television. And I was curious from a gamer perspective, is there going to be sort of a mode or a private setting that if you don't want to sort of get inundated with updates from people and things like that, and you just sort of want to focus on the game at hand?
Yeah, for sure. You know, much like today, because today you can, for example, turn off notification toast when people come in or set beacons or things like that. We'll have that same type of control where you can decide, hey, I don't want people coming in either socially or doing any of those other things. We definitely want to have that experience.
Okay. A lot of the stuff you talked about was new cable functionality, where your cable box plugs into the next Xbox. Stuff like Skype, all these things. How much of that, with all these new services, are you considering a price hike for Xbox Live Gold, and how much of the new functionality in terms of like the cable television is behind the Gold paywall?
So we'll have more details on where we are with Xbox Live, I think, upcoming. I think you'll see some of that pretty quickly. The thing I'll tell you is it's the same service, and you should think about it the way that you think about the service today. So the same type of way that we tend to put entertainment experiences behind Gold, we will, because that's where we feel like we can really create a really magical experience. And my expectation is it's your service that you currently subscribe to, and it just sort of rolls over. And you should take that as a bit of a tell on your other question.
Great. This is sort of another thing about memberships. One thing that looked very cool in the video was the fact that every person in the household sort of has their own ID, so that the voice recognition, the facial recognition, if I'm there, it sees that I've been watching Boardwalk Empire. If my wife's there, she's been watching a different program, or if like my daughter was there, she's been playing a certain game, which I think is great because it definitely adds that personal element to it. The one thing that I was curious about is, will there be some sort of umbrella where one Gold membership for, like, say, the head of household can be transferred to other members of the house, or does each individual member of the house have to have their own separate Gold membership?
So, great question, and you were paying very close attention to the video, so that's impressive. You will talk a lot more about sort of the way Gold works upcoming, so you'll see a little bit more about that. But the thing I'll tell you is that what you just asked, which is how do we make it work in the house kind of the way that you would expect it to, which is my babysitter came over and they can have access to the experience, or my kids want to have access to the experience and they want to have their own identities, but while still getting all of that value of the experience. That's really central for us. And so I think you're going to see some really cool stuff about how we make that experience work. Because if you don't, then everybody just will go behind one account and you'll lose that ability.
Yeah, exactly. And I know like Amazon Prime has sort of a thing where people can log into different one account. Okay.
Right.
This has been something that has been out there for a long time. It wasn't addressed yesterday. Is there any plan in terms of used games? Will consumers be able to sell their games, buy used games digitally or on disc?
Yeah, they'll be able to, like today, they'll be able to take their physical games and back to a retailer and sell a used game and buy them.
Okay, cool. One thing that I was interested in was the idea that, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I got the impression that developers are going to be able to use cloud calculations and sort of offload portions of the game that might be AI or NPCs or multiplayer functions for like an MMO type game, and actually have the cloud be doing game calculations and sort of taking a little bit of the load off the CPU. Mm-hmm. Is that correct?
That's absolutely correct. In fact, I'll take it a step farther than where you went. What we're trying to do is to ensure that our creators have access to elastic computation, which gives them, immense computing power. So like the ability to do things that you could not do without massive data centers backing it. And they can use those for a bunch of different in a bunch of different ways. I think you'll see it used in things like much larger matches that are more persistent and more consistent. I think you'll see it for a lot of things you talked about, which is larger worlds that may have, like, for example, the way that most games work today is there's like this bounding box where the AI is simulated, and then outside of the bounding box, it's kind of a very, very loose sort of simulation. Well, suddenly they'll be able to run the AI kind of in the entire world all at the same time. And I think, the types of creativity that's going to come from that is really kind of unparalleled. And we've spent a lot of time on how to build in raw access to our system and to live with that kind of compute capability, so that it's really easy for developers to take advantage of it.
Just because it's been sort of controversial, the idea that the system might be always on for single player games. If a developer is using cloud computing to, say, run AI routines in a single player portion, does that mean that there might be some games that you need to have an online connection to play single player?
For sure, that is possible. I mean, that's kind of a game developer decision
Okay.
because that's really, in my way of putting it, is if you do something that absolutely must have access to the internet, whatever that is,
Sure,
stream a
yeah.
Netflix movie, play multiplayer, and if you built a game in such a way that the access to that world was dependent on being able to access the running side of it, you're only going to do that connected online. I mean, imagine
Right.
lots of people, I mean, this is a somewhat adjacent sort of example, but lots of people actually play things like World of Warcraft in, quote, single player mode. They're going off and doing their own thing. But yet, of course, you expect to have to connect to the service on that because
Right.
that's how they build this really expansive world. That said, I think what you'll see is that most people will build single player games that take advantage of internet experiences, and if the internet wasn't there, they degrade gracefully so that you can still play that experience if it's
Okay.
if the internet's down or something.
So the goal is to at least have that sort of a fail-safe. People should be able to play a game that they bought single player.
I mean, I would just say it slightly differently, and this isn't. I'm not. This is not some like, oh, I'm trying to like. My goal is that creators have ultimate flexibility to create magical experiences.
Right.
I would be thrilled if people created games that were so amazing that they could literally only be run while they're on the internet because they were using the internet to make them more amazing. I think we should all be thrilled by that.
Sure.
We're not trying to force that, or it's not like a dependency of the system or something
Right.
like that.
Okay.
I think you'll see that most people will use the internet to make the experience better. In single player, they'll sort of be able to take it, to sort of manage if there's an outage or things like that. I don't know if that makes sense, but
so it's more on the developers and what their goals are.
yeah, and just sort of where's the creativity, and you may find who knows what interesting, cool things we'll find out there.
Somebody during the presentation yesterday confirmed that the system was not backwards compatible with 360 games and 360 discs. Since that seemed like a pretty definitive answer, I'm wondering, is there a strategy that you guys have to provide access to back catalog games?
You know what? I think there's a couple of things I would say. It's not backwards compatible. The architectures aren't compatible in that way. I think you're going to see a lot of the best games that people play the most are going to exist on both, and so like there will be a rolling forward period where people, whether it's the games that you would expect to be on the device are going to be there. I don't have more to add around sort of how do we think about the back catalog on 360. The other side I would say is just that we're going to be investing pretty deeply in the 360 ecosystem. So we expect that that's something that both from a gaming, a service, a community perspective will be really, really vibrant for a long time to come.
Do you have a confirmation of which cable providers and cable boxes will be compatible with the next Xbox on launch day?
We don't have details to add on that right now. There's a couple of things I would say, though. You've seen us with the 360. We have applications for most providers, and we've been adding a lot of them over the last year, and you're going to see that continue. And then secondly, one of our goals is to work with the TV that you get, regardless of how you get that TV. And so we're going to keep sort of making strides on the types of connections, the types of service, and how does that get into the console. One of the ones that we're focusing a lot on is just the HDMI pass-through scenario and how do we pull that experience through. I think it'll be a broad experience at launch, and you'll see more details in the future.
You talked about the gaming DVR that sort of shows past highlights and achievements and various things that are sort of recorded to be shared. Are there any plans to provide users on Xbox Live and the next Xbox to live stream gameplay matches, to spectate? Is live streaming something that you're looking at for
Yeah,
the
we think
Xbox?
it's a really cool space. I think you're going to see a lot from us kind of in those areas. If you imagine our system, the ability to have a Kinect with every system that has both great sort of RGB and voice capture as well as a bunch of other capabilities, the ability to run things at the same time that you're running the game, and the ability to sort of switch between those experiences. I think you can imagine those capabilities lead to a lot of those types of scenarios. Those are things we think that scenario is a really cool scenario.
When they talked about the system itself, there's basically, my impression is there's 3 OSs, sort of a dual partitioned. One is running the pure game. One is a smaller partition that's sort of running apps and other things in the background, which sort of allows, say, a television app to be sort of in a low-level mode and instantly switch between, and then there's a main sort of, I guess, super ego OS that's sort of, you know, allotting resources between the two. My question is, in terms of RAM, you said there's 8 gigabytes of RAM. My impression that was 5 of that was being diverted to the game, 3 to sort of running the always-on kind of apps partition. Sony has 8 gigabytes of DDR5 RAM, which is pretty fast RAM, and I think it's all unified towards games. Do you think that puts you at a technical disadvantage because there's only functionally 5 gigabytes of RAM?
Yeah, I'm not going to talk about Sony system. I'm not close enough to really sort of understand how their system works. I will say that I think the way that we've balanced our system is really key in terms of 2 things. The first one is we believe that we're going to have amazing experiences that are clearly next gen. I think you guys saw some experiences. I think they set a bar that's very, very high. I think that our games are going to look great. I think they're going to be the best looking games in the living room. And I think the experience that you can have along with those games, the ability to run experiences at the same time. And this isn't about, oh, so that I can watch TV at the same time that I'm watching a game. Like, those are interesting scenarios as well. At a gaming level, like the ability to create a modern gaming experience where live and the sort of apps and services you can run at the same time as the game, we think will really change that experience, and we think is key. And then the third thing is we've balanced the system across what's locally running on the client as well as what's available in the cloud, which we think frankly gives yet another sort of ability to access power and to drive an experience at a very different level. And frankly, it's one of the things that's really nice about working at Microsoft, because there's very few places that have both the access and the desire to build the infrastructure in the cloud side and the sort of ability around sort of core operating system and core developer tools to pull those things together. And so I feel great about the way our gaming experience is going to run on our platform. I think it's going to be the definitively next generation experience. They
said, or at least was my impression at the presentation, that it was going to come packed in with the Kinect sensor array. It didn't look like it was packed in with a headset, which to me, having the headset kind of included in the last generation was really a pretty crucial thing that I think drove chat and drove community on Xbox Live, whereas Sony went with a kind of piecemeal Bluetooth accessory thing, and I think that really helped, in my opinion, Xbox Live become a destination for multiplayer gaming. Do you feel that the new Kinect sort of replaces the headset in terms of multiplayer chat, or why aren't you including a headset in the...
So I think you're going to see a lot of cool things about what we're doing with headsets. In our overall strategy, we think headsets are great, and we want there to be great headset experiences. I do think the new Kinect can, I wouldn't use the word replacement. I think it can be a great communication experience for gaming. And I think actually the capability, frankly, when in particular powering it with Skype and allowing that to constantly run so that I can choose between audio only, audio and voice, so that those things can run across games like we've been doing with parties for so long, I think is really foundational to how we think about the communication experience. So I do believe you're going to see a lot of game communication sort of using Kinect. I also think you'll see a lot with headsets as well.
Say I'm watching a hockey game or a football game, and it's halftime of the football game. I'm going to go play a game while I wait for halftime to be done. Is it possible that the system could notify me that the football game had sort of resumed, and then I could come out of the game and back to the TV show I was watching?
Yeah, it's a great idea. It's for sure possible. I think for us, we think about what is the roadmap from launch and sort of how do we pull that together. Like that idea of, am I getting the notifications I want to go do the activities I want, is really foundational. I think you're going to see us use it in a bunch of different ways. The game one to me is really key. One of mine is, just as a minor example, I loved this game called Poker Smash. It's like an Xbox Live Arcade game. It's kind of like Bejeweled meets poker type of thing. And it had a really fun multiplayer.
Right.
But it wasn't really full. There weren't that many people playing. And so of course you try a couple times and you're like, okay, I'm out. And you go play something else. And I love the ability that I could set up something that's really unique. Or I could set up, I just want, the next time that the hopper comes around on zombies mode, I want to sort of be notified in sort of a big game. I think both of those are really, really key scenarios.
I just want to touch on the controller really quickly. It's got better rumble. One thing that I think for gamers is going to be a big selling point, maybe not as sort of a flashy technology point, but it looks like the D-pad has finally been corrected to sort of an actual cross D-pad as opposed to sort of the various discs. It's been
Yeah.
probably really the only flaw in what it otherwise has been, I think, the best controller on the market.
Yeah.
I'm curious, we'd heard there was patent issues that were holding that back before. How was that resolved, and why were you finally able to sort of maybe create an actual conventional D-pad finally?
You know, well, I don't think there weren't issues like that I know of. I wanted a great D-pad, and so we wanted a great D-pad, so we spent a lot of time on really dialing that in. Did you get to try it yesterday? Did you try to feel the D-pad? Super digital, super nice. I think people are going to love that D-pad. My goal is pretty simple. I just want to have the best controller in the world, and I want, you know, that thing, because it is the thing that you hold in your hand, you know, for a decade playing games. And I think we, to your point, I think we did a great job with the 360 controller, but this one I think is going to be a phenomenal controller.
Great. Thanks for your time,
Yeah,
Mark.
great.
I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right.